Hello and welcome to what will probably wind up being the first ever Fight Noise YouTube video. Depending on how I shuffle these in, this may be the inaugural version. Welcome! Be excited, it's going to be so much fun. Probably not at first, actually. It's going to be a learning curve for me. I appreciate anyone who's joining at this point of the journey because these videos are going to be rough early on. I'm warning you because I haven't done this before, but I'm going to give it a shot. I'm sure I will learn as I go and it will get better. But for the time being, if you're interested in listening to some MMA talk from a person who knows very little about MMA, next to nothing, some would say absolutely nothing, but who watches it and is essentially addicted to watching it, I'm your guy. That's me. So I'll be talking about, certainly not MMA strategy or tactics, which I know nothing about, sadly, but I will be talking about the fan perspective on upcoming fights, the promotional implication of upcoming fights, MMA marketing and MMA through the lens of a professional marketer, which I occasionally am. And that's what we'll be doing. So let's kick it off. I wanted to talk today about the very timely topic of Israel Adesanya versus Yoel Romero at UFC 248 coming up Saturday evening, March 7th? Something. Tomorrow, from the time I'm recording this video, anyhow. So many things to discuss about this fight. It's obviously a great fight. Fantastic matchup. If you've been following the promotion leading up to the fight, especially in the past couple days, Yoel Romero is doing double and triple duty in terms of creating an endless stream of viral internet moments that should not be ignored and it will not be denied their incredible reach on social media. That guy is the most underpromoted and underutilized in promotion fighter in the history of MMA. Talk about a guy who can cut a promo. Good Lord. Unbelievable speaker, unbelievable stage presence. Amazing guy. But that's not quite what I want to talk about today. A subject for another video, perhaps. But the specific topic I wanted to touch on today takes us back to a question a lot of people had been asking in the lead up to this fight or since this fight had been announced. Israel Adesanya, fantastic champion, superstar on the rise, was initially set to fight number one contender Paulo Costa when Costa had to pull out with an injury, or I believe he was having a surgery, which pushed the date of their inevitable meeting back. Adesanya had an option. Many options, actually. Given his level of activity and his current star power, I think he easily could have simply sat out and waited for Costa to come back. Stay active on social media, get your face out there, keep your brand growing, but not take a test or risk your title against any other contenders in the meantime. Wait for that Costa fight. I believe he had that option, and again, given his level of activity in recent years, no one would have begrudged him that. Extremely active fighter. I think he fought like 5 or 6 times last year. Is that right? Something very active. Instead, he has elected to not only take a fight, but to take a fight against one of the most dangerous fighters, not just in the middleweight division, but perhaps in the history of the sport. Yoel Romero, of course. This is an interesting choice. It's obviously great for us fans. We get to see an amazing fight. But one might ask the question, is this the smartest move for Israel Adesanya's career? If you were his manager, would you advise him to, instead of waiting out to fight Costa, or perhaps taking an arguably less dangerous matchup in the interim, would you advise him to fight Yoel Romero? And what I'm going to theorize in this video is that the answer to that question is a definitive yes. And here's why. And it's a really interesting phenomenon that I think represents a change in the way certain fighters are thinking about approaching risk in fights. And yes, it will tie us back to the inescapable theme of Conor McGregor and how he has changed promotion and how people think about, frankly, wins and losses. And long story short, the concept is this. Israel Adesanya, I believe, recognizes, I would say correctly, what Conor McGregor has recently discovered, which is that once you reach a certain level of notoriety and stardom and fan interest, losing is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Losing is not a nail in the coffin of your career. Losing is not only not necessarily a step backwards, but in the right context, losing can actually be a loss, can be parlayed into even greater star power, greater financial success, often in the form of a rematch of the fight you lost. The obvious example here is Conor McGregor versus Nate Diaz, which represented his first loss in his UFC career, and what at the time a lot of people thought was the end of the McGregor hype train. How incorrect was that? Not only was it not the end of the McGregor hype train, but McGregor was able to turn that loss into a fantastic narrative that built a rematch that wound up being an even bigger fight than the first. Now, you could argue that you need to win the rematch in order for this formula to work the way you would want it to work. But the idea is that as long as you are able to create the right narrative, the right story around a loss, it can be a tool for promotion as opposed to a disadvantage or a challenge. And what that necessitates, or what makes that a lot more viable, is taking the big challenges, right? So you have two different schools of thought here. You have, on the one side, you could call it the Floyd Mayweather approach, which obviously has been very successful for Floyd Mayweather and has been successful for many other fighters, but it is the approach of caution. I am only going to take fights that I am highly, highly confident I can win in order to preserve my aura as an undefeated fighter. And that aura has a certain marketability and bankability. Again, worked very well for Floyd Mayweather, certainly has and will work for other fighters. However, what Conor McGregor seems to have uncovered, and again, I don't think he's the first person to do this, but he is the most obvious example. What he has uncovered is that there's another way to play it. If you perpetually raise the stakes, if you are constantly putting yourself in a position to be involved in fights that going into the fight are perceived as these extraordinary challenges, well, turns out that if you get a phone call on your phone, which is also your recording device that you're using to launch your YouTube empire, it stops the video. So we had a little interruption there. A technical difficulty. You're along for this crazy ride, and things like this are going to happen. So please enjoy. But as I was saying, I think this fight with Romero represents, for Israel, taking this fight with Romero represents his recognition that this is a way to raise the stakes. This is an exciting fight, the excitement of which outweighs the potential downside or the potential risk of losing to a very formidable opponent. And let's think about it. Like, what would be the worst case scenario here? Let's say he loses to Romero. Do you think he doesn't get an immediate rematch against, as I spoke about earlier in this video, one of the most marketable opponents anyone could wish for in MMA history? Is a rematch with Yoel Romero not a blockbuster pay-per-view headlining event? It definitely is. Now, you want to win the rematch, things get a lot more complicated if you don't win the rematch. In this hypothetical scenario, I'm not saying I'm even picking Yoel to win this fight, but again, a different way to play it, a different set of opportunities, a different way to approach being an MMA star and navigating your MMA career. And I would argue a less pursued, but no less smart and rational a way to choose your matchups and put yourself into the right kinds of situations. A very different path than the Floyd Mayweathers of the world have taken. Nothing wrong with that path. That's another way to play it. But it appears to me, and I think this is good news for everyone involved, really, including us fans, that Adesanya is noticing this opportunity, this way of approaching his career, and embracing the, for lack of a better name for this, we'll call it the Conor McGregor approach for the time being. Conor McGregor fans will love that. Non-Conor McGregor fans are going to be aghast that I would refer to it in such a manner. But again, just the most available example. But what I think this means is Adesanya is embracing a career path that jumps headfirst into risk, that seeks out the biggest, most exciting challenges, that comes with the risk that in all it makes it much more likely that he will lose during his UFC career, but it makes the fights he takes in the near future that much more exciting, and it gives him this opportunity to take a loss and sort of spin a potential loss, not saying he's going to lose, potential loss, and spin it into this kind of promotional gold that we have seen Conor McGregor able to manufacture. Again, not suggesting that Adesanya is quite at Conor's level in terms of star power, but I think he has enough. He has enough of a foothold in the UFC promotional machine to be able to go down this road. And I think it's a very exciting path, not only for him, but the more fighters, the more stars and champions we see embrace this approach, I think the more it sort of opens up the field in every division for fighters to have a viable career path that not only doesn't avoid going after the bigger, more exciting fights. Not that that's been nearly as big a problem in MMA as it has been in boxing. It's actually quite the opposite. Had great matchmaking in MMA. But I think this will only accelerate that further and give us fans more of the fights we're excited to see, and make for, frankly, in the case of these high-profile stars, much more interesting careers, and is essentially a win-win for all. So that's my 2 cents about Adesanya and this particular choice to take on the formidable Yoel Romero. It's going to be a great fight. Hope you guys enjoy it. Hope you semi-enjoyed this first Fight Noise YouTube video. Many more to come. We'll see about that. I'd say that now, but who knows? But at the end of the day, it was a video. Till next time.